The storm had arrived in Snowy Creek 3 days before Christmas, blanketing the town in a picturesque layer of pristine white. But behind the postcard, perfect scene, all was not calm. Jimmy McCoy paced the stage of the department store, waiting impatiently for his next queue of eager children. As Snowy Creek's seasoned Santa, he knew the drill by heart after decades filling the role. But this year, something felt off. A sudden wave of dizziness overcame him mid-ho. And he nearly dropped little Susie Edwards from his lap. Blaming it on the season's festivities catching up, Jimmy dismissed the incident and powered through. But that night, a vivid nightmare plagued his sleep with haunting visions that refused to fade come morning. The next day, he vanished from his post without explanation, sending the town into a tizzy. Sheriff Peter Thompson led the search, suspecting Jimmy had simply clocked out early for the holidays as usual. But 3 days later, when Jimmy resurfaced stumbling through the forest, clothes tattered and speech incoherent, the sheriff realized something more sinister may be afoot. "It's here," Jimmy warned between labored breaths, scratches marking his pale skin. "We're not safe. Has to be stopped." The sheriff dismissed it as Yuletide madness induced by too much eggnog. Still, he couldn't ignore how Jimmy's wild eyes gleamed with genuine terror. As the search called off with no signs of disturbance, life seemed to return to normal in Snowy Creek. Caroling filled the streets as crowds packed shops in a bustling consumer frenzy. But Mary Cole, daughter of the town's general store owners, wasn't so easily convinced. Something about Jimmy's state gave her pause, and when half-empty plates of cookies began disappearing from homes without explanation, she knew she wasn't alone in her suspicions. That night, alone in the attic, perusing old records, Mary stumbled upon clippings recounting strange tales from Snowy Creek's past. Bells chiming in the forest with no explanation. People vanishing into thin air without a trace. And in the winter of 1898, the same year etched into the floorboards, a spate of unsolved child abductions that rocked the town to its core. The following morning, Mary confronted Sheriff Thompson with her findings. But he merely chuckled, assuring her those must be embellished old wives' tales. "This is the present, not the past. Some things are best left buried," he advised, keen to dismiss growing doubts as the season strains on sanity. That evening, as carols sang in the town square, the Andersons' youngest daughter, Amy, slipped away unnoticed. Only when her signature giggles failed to echo through the festivities did parents realize she was missing. A frantic search ensued to no avail. Days later, Amy's favorite doll was found deep in the forest, dress stained crimson beneath fresh snowfall. The sheriff could no longer deny something sinister had invaded their winter wonderland. But confronting that harsh reality meant admitting the quaint charade of safety veiling their town for so long may have been just as fragile as the ice beneath their skates. And once that thin veneer cracked, who knows what darkness from the past may take hold, where Santa once reigned supreme. The discovery of Amy Anderson's doll shattered what remained of Snowy Creek's facade of calm. Frenzied speculation spread faster than the winter storm bearing down, dragging long-buried anxieties from the townsfolk's collective subconscious back into the light. At the center of the chaos stood Jimmy McCoy, whose delirious emergence from the forest days prior now seemed a dire omen. Sequestered for questioning at the station, his scratch-marked ravings took a far more sinister tone in this new context. "It's the Wendigo," Jimmy shuddered, eyes glassy with remembered terror, came down the chimney, just like him. But this beast craves flesh, not sweets. We're all prey. Under its hungry gaze, the sheriff dismissed such folklore, pressing for fact. But Jimmy's fragmented recollections only spurred more riddles than answers. Visions of towering antlers amid swirling snow, a feral, starving creature stalking the trees, and the chill of malevolent eyes watching from the forest as children's laughter rang through darkened windows on long winter nights. Its hunger was never sated, its thirst for victims endless, no matter the feast. As Jimmy struggled to separate memory from nightmare, Mary Cole arrived with grisly findings of her own. Producing the 1898 archives she unearthed, she laid out parallels between the prior abductions and Amy's disappearance too uncanny to dismiss. Hard evidence suggested the intruder was highly capable and disturbingly strategic in its attacks. No tracks or signs of struggle ever materialized, each child simply fading without warning, like wisps of the children's breath in icy air. The sheriff's skepticism wavered against this mounting evidence. Still, entertaining notions of mythical forest monsters proved harder to swallow than festive spirits of Christmas past. His worldview clashed with the unexplained, and preserving law and order required rational solutions, not flights of imaginings. That night, torches lit the forest as volunteers combed for any sign in the worsening blizzard. At the edge of town, Sheriff Thompson encountered Mary braving the storm alone and begrudgingly accepted her aid. But as hours passed fruitlessly, tensions rose with the mounting toll. Another ranger radioed a chilling discovery. Little Susie Edwards had also gone missing from her home, as if plucked right from under the protective boughs of a tree laden with freshly hung ornaments. The final threads holding Snowy Creek's sense of normalcy, unraveled in a blizzard of panic and paranoia. Returning to the station, dejected, Sheriff Thompson found Jimmy had slipped his restraints in a psychotic daze. Through the glass storefronts encircling the square, hellish shadows seemed to dance among the shops as silver Christmas lights flickered menacingly. And in their glow, Sheriff Thompson spotted a figure huddled and shuddering alone. Jimmy McCoy, crusted in fresh blood and shivering uncontrollably. It spoke to me, showed me things. He wheezed, clutching something small and mangled. A chill ran through Thompson, recognizing Amy Anderson's favorite red ribbon. Whatever had infiltrated their town was real and closing in. While Snowy Creek reeled in the wake of fresh horrors, Mary Cole sought answers among the ruins of history, returning to the secluded attic whose vestiges of the past proved prophetic. She delved further into the enigmatic terrors that once gripped the town. What she uncovered disturbed far beyond her darkest imaginings. Journal entries from the local doctor in 1898 cataloged escalating cases of hysteria and paranoia among the townsfolk as disappearances mounted with no explanation. Rampant speculation of witches, demons, and otherworldly forces seizing children from beds in the dead of night ran wild. But most chilling were detailed examinations of the few victims ever recovered. Hollow shells left with skins, paper, thin and sightless, sockets where eyes once shone. In their organs swirled anomalies, unrecognized by science, and tests seemed to suggest a mysterious ailment spreading like miasma through the fractured community. As snow drifted to bury evidence, the doctor's own musings descended into madness. Scrawled ravings of townsfolk turning on each other in blind vengeance, accusing fingers pointing at any who dissented as consorts of the dark. A crescendo of suspicions, poisoning civility until order broke and shadows ran unchecked. When spring came, only ashes remained. Mary realized the seeds of derangement and paranoia were not new to Snowy Creek soil, merely lying dormant until waters of mystery and fear stirred them back to violent bloom. As she crept downstairs, clutching faded pages, an unearthly shriek pierced the night. Out the window, a familiar shape fled past into the storm's ceaseless fury. Barreling towards the station at breakneck speed, Mary's truck skidded to a halt outside. Within, she found the sheriff trying vainly to restrain Jimmy once more. But a violent transformation now. Gimme once more. But a violent transformation now gripped the man. Fingernails grown talons that slashed viciously at any who dared. His screams reverberated not with terror now, but feral hunger. When Jimmy turned glistening jaws upon her, Mary saw not a man, but monster staring back with alien hunger through familiar eyes. A maddening infection was turning souls against each other as history threatened to repeat in gruesome imitation unless its mysteries were solved. She brandished the doctor's journal, hoping answers could thwart the spreading psychosis. Through the barred window, Jimmy raged and howled as the Wendigo's maddening song threatened to claim another soul. But Mary refused to lose hope. Not when the cure may lie dormant in the cryptic scrawls of a long-abandoned clinic from another winter's horror, so long buried in Snowy Creek's past. In the aftermath of Jimmy's disturbing transformation, Sheriff Peter Thompson faced a crisis beyond any winter storm. With the Wendigo's contagion now proving virulent enough to claim human vessels, panic threatened to consume Snowy Creek as surely as the encroaching blizzard. Secluding what remained of Jimmy for study in the station's cold cell did little to assuage mounting hysteria outside. As snowdrifts swallowed walkways between gingerbread houses, resentment festered that the sheriff failed to vanquish threats. Resentment festered that the sheriff failed to vanquish threats, residing where decorations once did. Poring over the doctor's ravings with Mary, clues emerged that this wasn't any ordinary man, eater haunting the northern woods. Its origin seemed linked to rituals of a shaman reputed to dwell in perpetual starvation as penance among the Ojibwa centuries ago. What began as spiritual discipline warped over generations into an abomination, feeding parasitically off community. More pressingly, the sheriff noticed patterns. All victims thus far had family ties to the fur. Trapping McCullough clan, whose ancestral cabin stood dark on the forest's fringes since their mysterious disappearance decades ago. Could remnants of that clan hold keys to unraveling the Wendigo's weaknesses? Braving the howling gales, Thompson and Mary investigated the dilapidated homestead. Within, signs of squatting were dismissed until a hidden door creaked open, revealing a frigid storeroom stacked with haphazard trophies. Encased human eyes stared frozen in agony, entrails knotted like garlands among antlers and dried skin. Someone was performing twisted rituals, drawing power from the Wendigo's mystique. As suspicion fell upon Jacob McCullough, the reclusive trapper, long rumored a religious zealot, Mary saw flashes of a figure fleeing through whirling snowflakes beyond the creaking porch. That night, screams shattered what remained of the hamlet's fragile nerves. Rushing to aid, Thompson found Mr. Butler writhing in the forest, viscera strewn through scarlet snow in frenzied violation. But lingering in the monster's wake was a familiar face. Jacob McCullough, muttering prayers with reddened hands upraised to the vengeful moon. Had the trappings of folk magic driven this man mad? Or did he hold forbidden secrets that could save them? As the community careened towards hysterical vengeance, Thompson knew he must unravel the true threads binding McCullough, the Wendigo, and their town's long nightmare before the darkness claimed them all. In the eye of the storm, an eerie calm descended upon Snowy Creek's snowbound streets. But within closed doors, panic simmered as uncertainty flourished in isolation. With the Wendigo's hunting ground widened to include their own, who could claim safety behind flimsy walls. At the station, Jimmy McCoy's fits subsided into an ominous stillness. Gaunt features bore more resemblance to the grisly trophies found in McCullough's shack than any man. Through bleary eyes, tendrils of memory stretched toward coherent truths, dancing just out of reach. Meanwhile, Jacob McCullough's incoherent ravings proved as impenetrable as the storms raging outside Thorpe Penitentiary's cells. His frantic prayers morphed languages in a litany to gods long lost to the northern waits. Had devotion become a mask for darker fanaticism over the years? Only Jimmy and Jacob held keys to unlock the Wendigo's nature. But lucidity seemed beyond their grasp. With the hunter and hunted descending into equal madness, Mary Cole knew their last hope lay in confronting the darkness at its source. Weeks earlier, she would not have dared venture into the forest at night, but with darkness seeping into their community from within, facing external shadows seemed the lesser evil. Sheriff Thompson protested, but she was beyond reason in her quest for answers. Tracking distant howls through deepening drifts, their light soon revealed the silhouette of a towering figure amid the skeletal trees ahead. Glowing eyes bored into Mary's soul with ageless malice. Yet its stance seemed tired, pained. Was this a beast or trapped soul crying out for release? Before she could discern its mystery, a crazed cackle shattered the forest's walls of white. Emerging with axe in hand, Jacob McCullough loomed as a different kind of monster, entirely in his unhinged zealotry. His wild swings sought not the Wendigo tonight, but the transgressors who dared approach his blasphemous altar in the woods. As frenzied blades collided, Mary saw her only chance was embracing the darkness she feared, not fleeing from its enigma. The Wendigo watched impassively as McCullough's crazed assault unfolded. Through its ancient eyes, all human squabbles seemed petty and fleeting. But when the fanatic's swinging blade grazed Mary's cheek, a spark of recognition kindled memories long dormant in its feral mind. With a roar that shook the forest's foundations, the towering beast lunged forth in a blur of antlers and claws. McCullough turned just in time to meet its fury, axe pinwheeling uselessly against the onslaught. His screams mingled with the howling blizzard as limbs were rent apart in a welter of gore. Mary scrambled back, shocked by the savage violence unleashed to protect her. Through the Wendigo's eyes burned an all-too-human intelligence, recognizing something within her, sparing its wrath. As its gory feast commenced, she realized this was no mere man-eater. It had once been as civilized as any, trapped in a purgatory, not of its making. When Sheriff Thompson arrived on the scene, only a tattered parka and splintered weapon remained. The Wendigo had claimed its sacrifice and melted back into the whiteout as swiftly and silently as any of its prey. Its message was clear. The true threat to Snowy Creek had been vanquished, at least for now. In the aftermath, as Mary recuperated at the station under Thompson's watch, revelations began emerging that recast their entire frigid odyssey in a new light. Jimmy McCoy's fits subsided into lucidity as fragmented pieces of his past snapped into a coherent, horrific whole. It seemed his family had been among the first victims of the Wendigo curse over a century ago. Subjected to unspeakable terrors as children, they managed to survive where others did not, only to become monsters in their own right through twisted rituals intended to placate the ancient evil. Jacob McCullough's family endured similar trauma, their minds fracturing under the strain into equally depraved vengeance. Across generations, the Wendigos' contagion spread plague, like through bloodlines, warping humanity as surely as the northern cold. Only through facing truths no civilization was prepared to confront could the curse be broken, Jimmy realized. And in Mary, he saw the first glimmer of hope for absolving generations of sins and restoring their town's soul at long last. But would facing darkness mean becoming it yourself? As Snowy Creek emerged from the storm, an eerie stillness fell over streets, long shrouded by drifts. Residents crept from homes wary the nightmare had merely been deferred, not ended. All that remained was tidying aftermath and facing uncomfortable truths beneath fallen boughs, heavy with meltwater. At the edge of the forest, Mary Cole stood vigil over the dark space where the Wendigo's sovereignty had presumably stood undisturbed for centuries. Though its touch still gripped Jimmy's fractured psyche, a glimmer of redemption lingered in its mercy toward her in those final hellish moments. Had ancient evil been swayed by glimpses of lost humanity? Or did hope for salvation lie in restoring the balance so violently upset since the first white settlers' arrival? She wondered if the Wendigo's curse might end, if its spiritual authority over these ancient lands was reaffirmed after so long, in forced exile and madness. Such musings were beyond the ken of Sheriff Peter Thompson, who could only see law and bringing closure to violent acts, not the ageless forces that shaped this seemingly idyllic town. And so, Jimmy McCoy was committed for a psychiatric evaluation to determine if the darkness within could be quelled or if a gentler future awaited him behind padded walls. There, the nightmares of a century might finally fade or fester anew if redemption proved too late for a soul so shattered. On Christmas Eve, as Snowy Creek flickered back to life beneath a dusting of fresh snowfall, Mary ventured into the forest, calling out across silent glades. Her message was met with only the sigh of breeze through boughs heavy with their corrupted bounty. Had the entity known as Wendigo vanished forever, or did it dwell even now, in spirit where none might glimpse its haunted visage? As dawn broke, Rosian communities stirred in hopes of light beyond darkness. Both threat and mystery remained deeply entrenched in these ancient shadows, awaiting only dormancy before emerging anew. Some secrets, Mary realized, could never truly be vanquished, only lurk beneath festive surfaces, as changeless as the northern stars above. And within haunted souls, darkness might yet find fertile soil to take new forms in future generations. All one could do was strive for balance and redemption wherever found, keeping vigil that evils forgotten did not rise again to poison what gifts remained. And so, Snowy Creek's long nightmare drew to an ambivalent close, as lingering unease and hope alike remained buried beneath winter's pristine silence for another year. For where Santa once reigned in twinkling supremacy, older entities stirred in perpetual observation, awaiting only mankind's folly to emerge once more from hibernation's slumber. The true story of their town was far from over.